Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined today by a very special group indeed, an unusual group. I don't know that we've had this particular permutation on the show before, but maybe. Lord Cognito of the Finding Duke and the Iron Lords podcast. How are you today, my friend? Welcome to the show.
Doing better than my Niners, doing better than my Mets. But we here to talk about this game I love.
Yeah, sick, man. Is that from Capcom?
It's from Capcom. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'm excited to have you here to talk. Sorry about the Mets. I know a lot of, I'm not a Mets fan personally. I am a Yankees fan, but I'm kind of lapsed with that too. Someone was asking me like, "Oh, are you going to watch the World Series?" I'm like, "Nah, I don't really care anymore." But I know so many Mets fans growing up on Long Island. Obviously, that is Mets territory, and a lot of sadness. But it was a good season.
Good season. We overachieved. I'm playing with house money. I'm over being overdramatic. At the end of the day, they were the worst team in baseball. No one expected this, and it became like this whole rallying cry. So I'm proud of them. And hopefully, the future is bright and this continues in an upward direction. That's what I'm hoping for now.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. I know that the teams The reason I stopped watching baseball was because of the salary cap issues, and that seems to be just because I felt like it was boring and weird. And then you see like all the money that the big team, including the Mets, spent or whatever, and it's like, this is so severely broken. They got to do something, especially with a league and a history of such robust farm systems and stuff like that, where you can really mature your players and all that. Anyway, enough of that. Welcome to the show, Rick Hoeg of Hoeg Law.
Hey,
how are you today, my friend? Welcome.
Talk. I'm doing okay. My Tigers were eliminated a little bit earlier than the Mets, but we also had a dream season that I wasn't expecting, so I am all for it. The thing with sports, and this is something like my siblings don't understand, my daughters don't understand, is that if you just react to the negative circumstances, you're going to have way more bad days than good. But the good days are earned from the bad days. And so the Tigers doing something dreamy this year, having a little bit of a run when they were however many games out of even 500 for portions of the season is great. The Michigan Wolverines winning the national title last year is great, even though they look like they have forgotten how to play the game of football this year. So yes, we have this year. I could spend my time being very sad and upset about it, but we got the goodness last year. And much like video gaming or any other hobby that you enjoy, you take the good and the bad. And there you have it.
You take them both and then you have. We're older people. We understand. You don't hear a Facts of Life references very much anymore.
That's a classic right there.
My references are always up to the minute. They have their fingers on the pulse.
Right. We love the 80s sitcom.
Hell yeah.
The sitcoms. I love them myself. But I was wondering about this. I was talking to Micah's dad on text, and he was like, you really got to like find a secondary team or like another team you can kind of like pull for. And I'm like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. It's not that I'm against people doing that. I just don't understand what that means. Like, I don't give a fuck what happens to any other team, really, unless it like affects my team. Like anytime an NFC team, Micah gets mad at me because like anytime an NFC team plays the AFC team, I just root for the NFC team. I'm like, yeah, just suck wins out of the conference. That's awesome. Like take as many wins out of the conference as possible. Whenever an AFC East team is playing someone else, I'm rooting against them. Like it's just, I have this whole complex thing, and I'm a huge hater, especially in hockey. And I used to be a huge hater in baseball. Loved it. So like, because people are like, oh, root for someone else. I'm like, I don't know I'm not doing that. Like, that's definitely not the solution. I'm not going to find another team. The point is I'm going down with this ship. Now, I am a bit of a metaphysical person, which is kind of weird. And I'm superstitious and all of those kinds of things, and I have been deeply superstitious my whole life. And I am of the mind that there's something with the Jets.
Met fans relate to this.
Yeah, like
who could blame me at this point?
Joe Benigo or Beningo, whatever his name is.
He was the greatest. I listen to him all the time
on WFAN.
Hell yeah.
He goes on this thing sometimes about how like about the Jets, like you can change the uniforms, you can change the owner, you can change the players, you can change the GM. You can change the practice facility. You can change anything you want. Nothing changes. And I was saying to Micah, I'm like, in Super Bowl III or before Super Bowl III, obviously the proclamation from Namath that he was going to win, that they were definitely going to win, was bold. Never really saw anything like that since. and they were underdogs in that game and they won. And I'm like, did he sell the Jets' soul or something for like, give me this win and like we'll never have to, and we'll never ever even get back.
Yeah.
You know
how you feel about that is how Mets fans feel about 86,
right?
Buckner and the ball going through the legs, and we were like, we prayed for it so much. So did we sell our soul for that one World Series win, and thus are cursed to never win again? So I know Jets and Mets have very similar cursed energy, so I can relate to this.
And a lot of overlap. I mean, the Long Island centric sports are not great, you know, but all have like this weird moment. Like the Islanders were a prolific hockey team in the 80s. Maybe the most prolific, except for maybe one of the Canadiens teams, the most prolific dynasty in all of NHL history, and just suck now. And they're actually I was thinking about it, like the last 10 years they make the playoffs and kind of like, and I'm like, no, this is kind of like fun. See, this is all I ever wanted. It's the same thing with the Jets. It's like, just make the playoffs every few years, for God's sake.
Competitive, please.
I was saying, I'm like, I remember saying to Micah before the season even started, I'm like, we're going to at least play competitive football this year. Like, it's not even competitive. It's not even Halloween, and we're already out. We were 4-3 last year at this point, by the way.
No, I was bummed for you even watching the Jets play when I get a chance to, because I know you were excited about it. And I always felt as an NFC North fan that Aaron Rodgers was not going the right direction even when you got him. But I didn't want to push on that button too hard because I know how you feel about the Jets. So I am sorry for you. Nobody deserves to have that much loss and pain. And believe me, as a Lions fan, that's no fun. In terms of your substitute teams, though, as a Lions fan, I did have one. And I had picked one from the other conference, looking for a Rust Belt kind of running-based team. The Steelers were the team that I rooted for as soon as the Lions were eliminated, which was usually pretty early.
Fair enough.
Yeah, sorry, I was itching my eye. It's funny, like the one thing I am simpatico with fans, like I always think of the Browns and the Lions specifically. Oh, yeah. The Lions are obviously emerging out of this cocoon finally, where I have sympathy for them, and it doesn't seem like a lot of people have sympathy for us, and I don't really understand why. You know, like
I think it was that first Super Bowl.
Yeah,
the Lions have never been in a Super Bowl at all.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And the Browns never either. Never won. They won the NFL championship, I guess, in the 50s. But anyway, it's not a sports podcast. It doesn't matter.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it could be whatever we want. But I'm of the mind that sports play a relevant role in life, and I try to embrace them and enjoy them. But man, it's rough out there. And yeah, I'm sorry for all our Mets fans. I know Maddie's probably going through it too, and all the rest. But Yankees Dodgers is a classic matchup, and should be good.
That's a lot of dollars on the line there.
Oh yeah, a lot of payroll.
Those are some big staff salaries.
Yeah, I don't really. I mean, I obviously want the Yankees to win, but I just have no buy-in to it anymore. It's weird. I used to be obsessed with the Yankees. Obsessed, probably from the late 80s, early 90s to 2005, 6, 7, something like that. And after that, I'm just like, I don't know, man. It's too much. It's too many games. It takes too much coming home every day from work or school or whatever, and then just having the Yes Network on. It's like a job.
Yes. Well, it's very stressful too.
Yeah, it is. It's just like a job. Sport. It's like, what are we doing every day? I have to do this. You know, at least you get some breathing room with football and hockey. There's like 4 days between games and all that. Anyway, Islanders play tonight, so that'll be good.
Baseball's insane. It feels like it's strange when there's an off day.
It's too much. It's always been too much. I used to like it when I had no responsibilities. It's like 162 games, man. That's fucking sick. And like, you know, just like watching them and looking forward to it and just really keeping up with it and stuff. And then like you get into the real world and you wonder how they even do it. Like, how do they even do this?
Yeah.
It's so much. It's not a very athletic game. I'm not going to say it is. It isn't. But it's a lot. It's just traveling and you're just kind of around. Mm-hmm. You know, you're just hanging out. You're in the bullpen. You're a fucking relief pitcher. You'll pitch like 2 innings every 5 days or something.
Yeah, and you have to be
on. You're just traveling around and just like, what is going on? It's like a circus, you know? Very interesting stuff.
I agree. No, I think baseball is the roughest kind of professional athlete life because chances are you're going to spend some time in the minors, which is not glamorous at all. And then when you make it, you're going to be playing every day and figuring out how to get to places and be stressed all the time.
It's a lot of money, which is nice. Anyway, and it is an interesting life. I always thought about like A and AA kind of career guys. where it's like, that's an interesting life. You're just getting shuttled around from team to team. You're never really going to make it. You're making like $50,000 a year. It's not even a good life. It's probably worse than anyone who works in an office or something like that for this little glimmer, and the love of the game, of course.
Yeah, I mean, you get to play a game that hopefully you enjoy if you're in that particular status in baseball.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't enjoy it that play it. I think that's true with a lot of sports. I think they're naturally good at things.
Right? Yeah. You think people are going to be really passionate about, say, game reviews or what have you. And certain aspects of people's lives just wind up in putting them in places that they don't necessarily love to keep the lights on and put the food on the table. So I get that. But that's the same with minor league baseball players. It's the same with office jobs. It's the same with everywhere. That's part of the interesting story of people's lives, is that you just assume that these rock star kind of jobs or jobs that have this high pedigree or through line that you get to see are going to be people that are passionate about that work. And sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. Heck, you even see it in the highest level of the pros when you talk about football players or what have you that don't look like they're invested in winning this particular football game, that are making business decisions more often than not about how they play. And so I think that's an interesting aspect of all of this. And I think it's a part of the discussion about salaries and all the things that come around sports, including the angry debate shows that you see every morning now.
Ugh, they're the worst.
They are the worst. I agree. So let's have an angry debate about this video game.
Yeah, let's do it. There's nothing to really debate. It's excellent, except for you, Hoeg. I'm here to talk about with my boys here today, Kunitsu-Gami, Path of the Goddess, which came to PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. This is a Sacred Symbols podcast, obviously, but also Xbox One, Xbox Series X. Is it on Switch?
No.
I don't believe
so
it is.
and PC. But it was on Game Pass, so that's where a lot of people. And apparently, I think it's still on Game Pass. And I think I saw that Phil Spencer had said that Microsoft invested into this game. So I didn't see them in the credits. So it's obviously a silent thing, but
they partnered for it to help them get it across the finish line as far as funding. A different type of a Game Pass deal to get more creatively as far as a lot of artistic stuff and just more to help the game get across the finish line.
Yeah. And I think that that's great. And I can see someone like Phil Spencer. The one thing I'll say about Xbox's executives is they seem to play games. They definitely do play games. Now we have Mark Cerny and stuff on the PlayStation side that definitely play, but you have a lot of people that clearly don't. And I've always said, like, even the PR people that are incredibly talented at what they do at Sony don't play games. A lot of them, so they don't know them like that. So you can see a guy like Phil Spencer or his team seeing a game like Kunitsu-Gami and being like, yeah, this is not obviously good to a lot of people, but it actually is really great. We want to see it across the finish line. So that's awesome. So it's still available on Game Pass. If you have access to that, you can just play it there. Came out July 19th, like I said, so it's older. We're getting to it 3 months later, or at least talking about it here. And it's built on RE Engine, which I thought was pretty interesting too. I want to get some high-level thoughts about the game from you guys, and we'll get into who made the game. I think it's interesting, some of the people that worked on it. And then we'll get into some of the finer points about what the game is and how it plays and if we enjoyed it or not. I'll start by just saying I bought the game when it came out. This is a great example of not paying attention to games that are coming up. I love doing this. Knowing, kind of vaguely aware of a game, you see the introduction trailer or an announcement or just a press release, and you're like, I'm good on that. That's exactly what I did with Metaphor, for instance. I have no idea. I bought it, but I really don't know anything about it. And Silent Hill 2 is another good example of this, where I'm like, obviously it's a remake of a game we've played, but so this was a really nice example of if you just kind of ignore everything, and then a game kind of sneaks up on you, and then you see gameplay of it or people start talking about it. I'm like, oh, yeah, nice. I didn't even expect this game to hit with me. So I bought it at that time and I played it. And I got about halfway through it, maybe a little bit more, and I kind of started getting bored with it. It started getting a little repetitive, in my opinion. So I put it down. I started playing other things, and then last month I went back and just started playing it again on mostly on Portal. It's perfect on Portal. If you guys have PlayStation Portal, it's really, really wonderful on there. And I slowly grind. I was like, I just want to beat this game and get it out of the way. And I ended up kind of falling in love with it, and seeing it for the depth. Got through all of the New Game Plus, platinumed it. And all the rest. And so I ended up really, really enjoying it. It was a slow burn game. And as I've said many times, and I'll throw it over to you guys, it kind of reminds me of Actraiser, which is a fan favorite for a lot of older gamers, but a favorite game of mine. I mean, one of my top 10 probably games of all time, and was I was seemingly the only person that cared when Actraiser Renaissance came out a couple of years ago. I loved it. I thought it was going to be huge. Like, oh my God, not huge, but like people were going to be like, oh man, Actraiser, like, yeah, this is a undiscovered gem from, Enix gem from early in SNES's life cycle. No one gave a shit about that though. So this really scratched that particular itch and is truly unique. That's the one thing I'll say about this game is just truly unique. There really isn't anything like this at all out there, because even the Actraiser reference is dated just because Actraiser really is segmented into two parts. This takes the two parts and shoves them into one part. So anyway, that's my take on it. Cog, I know you're a fan too, and I'm interested to see what you think of it.
Yeah, I'm glad we brought this up because this is a game I've been raving about for so long. And I remember my introduction was kind of similar to you. I remember seeing it at like an Xbox showcase or whatever. And I'm like, okay, Capcom game, looks interesting, looks mysterious. And I didn't know what the premise was at first. And I didn't know what style of game it was. At first, I thought it was just like an action game. And I'm like, okay, looks cool. You know, samurais, ninjas, Japanese culture, Cogs in, you know, so let's see what's going on. But then, you know, as I started to learn more about it, and I saw it like the second time, like, wait a minute, this is kind of like an action game in real time, but also this turn-based / tower defense. And I'm like, what is going on? And the thing that really drove me about it was that it just screamed culture. Like there's something going on here, whether it's religious, whether it's whatever they call this Kagura Action game. I didn't know what this is, but I felt like this is based on something that I need to learn about because it's so stylish. It's literally a piece of art as far as just the way it looks and the way it moves. And I was drawn immediately. And I remember playing it, starting it like you. And I'm like, the game kind of introduces mechanics slowly to get you kind of familiar. And I fell in love with this thing, man. I just could not stop playing it. I got more, deeper thoughts on it. But I remember playing it, beating it. And then to your point, Colin, I was a little saddened. But what happened? And I'm like, no, this cannot be. And we'll get into the other stuff, the new Game Plus stuff. But I absolutely love this game. It's an absolute gem. There's nothing like it. And I'm just glad a game like this exists. Like, we need more unique experiences like this. And happily, I got people to try it. And they were like, oh, yo, we love it. Like, I'm so glad you recommended it on Duke and stuff. So that's my high-level thoughts of it. But I'm curious. I know Hoeg, on the timeline, I'll put, like, Path of God and stuff, but I see you click liking it and stuff like that. So I'm curious with you, how you're feeling about it as well.
Oh, yeah. No, I have a similar story to you in terms of finding it. And I agree with you, Colin. There's a lot of games and other media that I like to say that I glance at. I get like a little bit of an understanding of when it's coming out, what my hype cycle should be like. So I'm not getting overly excited about things that say 2027 on the trailer, that kind of thing, but not finding out all the details, not reading all the previews, not reading all the reviews of things like this. And this was one of those. The first real impact that I had with this game was the demo. I think they released a demo about a week before it released in the summer. And I tried that out and I said to myself, well, this could potentially work. I enjoyed that, but I don't know whether it's just going to be 20, 30, 40 hours of just that. And one of the things that really connected for me with this game is that even during its first half, I thought that they were introducing new ideas in every level, crossing lakes, dealing with fog and light and various other things that really made it even better than I thought it was to begin with. Not to say that it started out without all of its component pieces, because I do think there are ways to make games where you hold back from the player, you don't give them everything they need, then you slowly dole out what the real game is so that by the time you're at the end, you're at the game that the designers intended. I would not characterize Kunitsu-Gami as doing that. I think it's great from the off, but then they have all these original and unique ideas per level that even add to that. And I remember playing through it going, what are they going to do next? Right? Really being driven to the next level, saying, what is going to be the next gimmick? Almost like you're playing a Super Mario Galaxy or Astrobot or something along those lines, where you're like, what is the next trick? And seemingly they never run out. Although here is where I give a disclaimer as to this particular game. I'm a little bit of an unusual inclusion in this group because even though this is a Spoilercast Sacred Symbols Plus, I have not beaten Kunitsu-Gami. And part of the discussion I want to have with you all is that, as you know, I've been recovering from my stroke, which was a couple of years ago now, and this is an action game at its core. It has tower defense elements. It has other things that are happening within it. But one of the things that happens in the middle of this game is that it really ramps up difficulty further than I had expected. So I'd invested this time. I'd invested this energy into really loving this. I think, Cog, you called it a piece of art, and I really agree with that. And it got past me. And that's not their fault necessarily, but certainly from the curve that I had experienced and what I was enjoying, it just went straight past what my dexterity was able to handle, even now, a couple of years later. And I might not ever get that full dexterity back. But I'm still thrilled with the product, even though I haven't gotten to play all of it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I wonder if I'm trying to think like a mouse would work nicely for this game for people that play it on PC, I guess. It's not truly real time in some sense, which is nice because it does stop. You can go into menus and do all those kinds of things. But yeah, that's good feedback. I mean, that's the kind of feedback that I think is valuable amongst the phalanx of this new movement of accessibility, generally speaking, like the things that people don't really think about. Not that it's too hard for a normal able-bodied person, but rather someone that might be recovering from something, like giving them a different sort of option or sealing them out completely. And the intellectual argument behind it's the same thing with Souls games. Like, should they be accessible? Should this game be tamped down? It's interesting. It's good feedback.
Yeah, and for people that don't know me or my tilts on this, I am a little bit more sensitive to the kind of 14 deaths before you can move an inch forward in a game. I'm not a big time Souls player. I do play Elden Ring and some of those things from time to time, but I do get a little bit more frustrated and essentially stop and do something else if I'm just going to sit there and die 50 times. And I know that that's not everybody. I know that a lot of Souls players say, yep, nope, that's part of the game. We just run through that. We learn the patterns and we go forward. And I do think I could force myself through some of these levels at the end of Kunitsu-Gami, but I'm not inclined to do so. So part of it is me. Part of it is my recovery. Part of it is the difficulty ramp. I don't blame anybody for any of this. They made the game they want to make. But that's part of this story as part of our discussion that I wanted to make sure people knew, because I have not gotten to the end. And I'm okay with being spoiled as to the end of this game. But that is my state right now.
I don't think the ending's like revolutionary or anything like that. But it's really more about the journey, as many games are. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have some of our high-level thoughts out there. And again, I wanted to do this show even though it's late and even though it's a niche product, because some people are going to be like, what are you even wasting your time with this? I mean, people were mad that I did Until Dawn coverage, which was surprising to me. It's like, it's a fucking second-party game. Of course I'm going to do something
on it. Did that come out like a couple weeks ago? You must have been
but they're like,
on the
who
release.
Cares? Go play Metaphor or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. I care. I want to play the games I want to play. But I wanted to do something like this because it is my hope that it draws some people's attention, even if they don't listen to it now. And hopefully if you've not played it, you just go and play it and then maybe come back and watch this or listen to this later. It'll be here for you. This is one of my favorite
games of the year. There's no question.
It's kind of my motive, Yeah, it's like, I think this game is definitely one of the best games of the year and is going largely ignored. I would be shocked if we ever got a sequel. I'd be shocked if they ever even acknowledge how much it's sold. Of course, Game Pass is going to mess all of those numbers up anyway, because they're not going to have sold a reflective amount of based on the demand. But we're looking at a game that, in my opinion, may have sold a couple 100,000 units or something like that. It doesn't seem like it. Now, it's a AA game. It's certainly not an expensive game. One of the things I wanted to get into, first of all, I want to compliment Capcom for giving a team, especially one of their big teams, kind of agency to do something like this. But I thought you guys would be interested in kind of who worked on it. And I couldn't find too much English language information on this game. They didn't do a lot of interviews or anything. I don't know why they didn't promote it more. I also think the game's name is not good. I think that it could be named that in Japan if it has more meaning to them there, but there's probably a better way to have named it here. I don't know that would have really mattered, but I think it is an off-putting name.
I will say I forgot it a number of times.
Me too.
Before I was invested in the game, I was like, I don't remember exactly. It's the word with the hyphen.
Now I know, but you're absolutely right. I had to look it up even when I was playing it. Like, what is it called? So there is that. But so the game's producer is Jun Takeuchi, who is an artist and animator by trade. And actually, Mega Man 5 was one of his first games that he worked on, which is awesome. He was the director of the original Onimusha, and he was the producer of Lost Planet, Resident Evil 5, and Lost Planet 2. And then he's been the longtime executive producer of that part of Capcom. So he executive produced like the Resident Evil games and Dragon's Dogma and all that. And then the director is Shuichi Kawada, who is an artist and designer, and he's been with Capcom since Resident Evil 4. And he's largely a cinematic designer. He worked on the remakes and all of the rest. And he did that game Shinsekai Into the Depths, which was an Apple Arcade and Switch game Capcom randomly released in 2019. I never played it. But what I thought was most interesting is the designer of the game is this guy named Maito Yamada, and he's a designer and writer, and he's relatively new. He's really only worked on Resident Evil 3 as a dialogue designer, or a dialogue writer. So I read this as some idea he came up with that must have been funneled through, Capcom's leadership. And they were like, yeah, we should follow up on this. And I want to give them credit and compliments for making a game like this, because there's really no reason for them to do this. there's no money to be made with this game. They must have probably realized that early on. And with Microsoft coming in, it maybe is even possible that they were just not going to finish it and maybe they needed external money. So I give them credit for really doing something like this. And I really do wish that it was one of those games where people saw it more for what it is, but we'll try to celebrate it here. Capcom made up a term. I actually had to look this up, called Kagura Action Strategy.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because that to me does suggest that they might want to make a genre out of this thing.
It would be nice. I looked it up, right? I was like, what the fuck? Every once in a while you see something, I'm like, I don't know what that means, to be perfectly honest with you. Is this like a Musou? And I just don't know, some sort of random name that I don't know. And I looked it up and all of the search results were for this game. So I'm like, okay, they made this up. It's even on the website for the game.
It is. It's on the description of the PlayStation like page. That's what this is. And it's like, well, that doesn't inform me. I don't know what you're saying.
So I looked up Kagura. It's a Shinto themed type of ceremonial dance that's at this kind of the center of the game. And there are apparently variants of this dance. And this is based around the dance style called MAI, which is like the slow, elegant, deliberate kind of dance. There's like a more frenetic, faster kind of dance that I guess is also Kagura. And so for people that are listening that maybe haven't played, and again, I hope you do play it or just stop and listen and play it, listen to this after you play, is the game it's kind of like a real-time strategy or tower defense game with a moving target, which is the dancing woman that you're bringing across the stage. So there's a day-night cycle. You come across you're on this mountain, Mount Kafuku or something like that. It's fake, whatever it was. Yeah, Kafuku. It's a fictional Japanese mountain. And you're working your way down it, ironically, and going to all these different settlements. I think there's like 17 or 18 of them. Some of them have boss fights. So I think there's like 27 encounters or something in the game. And each stage you find this seethe, black substance, and these enemies that spawn out of it, kind of overtaking all these different places. You clean it up. You grab the villagers. The villagers have been cocooned and attacked you. And then you take the villagers during this day cycle and you give them various character classes. And then at night, the seethe kind of come to life through these torii gates. And your priestess, who we'll get into in a little while, stops moving and kind of she can cocoon herself or be protected or whatever. And then the enemy's attack and you have to protect her. And what's really cool about it, as I was saying with Actraiser, is kind of like part God game, which this is in some sense, and then part action game, but they're separate and have nothing to do with each other. And in this game, they fuse them together so that you play it as an action game, like an isometric style action game almost, at the same time that you are commanding units. It's somewhat unprecedented in terms of its presentation. I've never seen anything like it before. And I really, really enjoyed it. I'm sorry, Ho, go ahead.
I just was agreeing with you. I think it is unprecedented. And I do think some of the Actraiser-ness also comes out of the fact that after you complete these levels, you then have a sense of building up the city that you just freed from the toxicity and corruption. And I do want to talk about the theme a little bit because this is one of my favorites. This is one that Japanese media often covers, which is kind of toxicity in industry versus nature and purity. And so part of what they say is in this game is that like the dwarves delved too greedily and too deep into this mountain. And so they unearthed this toxicity, which is the seethe. And then it's presented as this kind of unnatural pink and green that you might think of as like Far Cry New Dawn or other kind of nuclear apocalypses. And you clean it up and it becomes natureful and green and gorgeous. And you cure the rivers and all these various things. This is one of my favorite themes that the Japanese artists do. I really love Princess Mononoke, for instance, which is always my go-to kind of reference for folks that might know this. And I love Light versus Darkness. I love Alan Wake. I love nature versus corruption, this kind of stuff. And they do it so well because you do have that beat between levels where you can go and take your villagers and they've got a time component where they can rebuild the things that were otherwise taken over. And then the time component is how many levels you play after that. And you're kind of constantly going back to these old other places and fixing them up to get rewards that are primarily lore and art, right? So Cog mentioned that this is a piece of art. It really is, but it's so rewarding to go and see some of these models in kind of full high definition that you can earn, or to get these little bits of story about what this spirit means in this culture, how it came to be, why it's evil, and see how they designed this particular monster to reflect that it was greedy in this way, or that's why it has 6 arms that hold swords. and these various other things that all kind of flow together in a way that I think a lot of games do design. I think there's a lot of effort that goes into a lot of game design, but you don't always get to see it in this way. And as somebody that loves narrative and story, and this game ostensibly doesn't really have one, there's no dialogue. You're just rolling through these various areas. You get all of that in these little stories and the actual art that is coming through these monsters and this toxicity that you're curing. And I just think that's so impressive for especially a visual medium, right? Like we talk a lot about narrative, we talk a lot about story, or certainly I do. And some people say, well, Rick, you just want to watch a movie, you just want to read a book or these various things. And I don't think that's accurate in every case, but there's certainly a grain of truth there when we talk about game and gameplay. And this kind of combines story and narrative and atmosphere into what you're actually doing in a way that's, I think, maybe a little purer than some of the other things that are cinematic in nature. And I really love that. This is what games can be. And I wanted to at least mention that as part of this conversation, because I think it's a great thing that's accomplished in what is a very simple kind of concept. You're going to be this avatar of light dressed in blue that may or may not be real, seems to be brought into being by the priestess herself. She's going to dance around the stage. And when you get to the real bad things, she's going to dance a little faster and all the bad things are going to go away. Like as a concept, it doesn't make a ton of sense, but what they capture with the music and the drum beats and the art is just fantastic.
It's funny, man. Like it's weird how derivative everything seems when you play a game like this and wonder why people aren't using their minds more, their brilliant design chops, their ability to make wonderful art and have a platform like an opportunity at a publisher like Capcom to do something special. I understand doing rote and repetitive things it's safe and people like what they like. And I like what I like. I mean, I'm not insulting any of that. It's just so weird that that something like this is so noticeable as being different when it was only a couple of generations ago when we got different things all the time. Mm-hmm. Now we seem to be getting a lot of the same sort of stuff. So I think things like this are going to become more and more visible and hopefully more attractive. Though, again, I don't know that there's any monetary reason to do it, which is unfortunate.
Well, I hope so. I hope at bare minimum we can make it the kind of Oscar bait type of category for these studios to get prestige, right? Capcom can do this kind of thing because they got Resident Evil and Monster Hunter paying the bills. And so then you can spend money making the crazy indie movie that your director wants to make. Fantastic. Let's play Kunitsu-Gami. And if we can get more of that working through the video game industry, I think gamers are going to be the ones that benefit the most. So Kunitsu-Gami can be an exemplar, can be that beacon for these kinds of games. And I don't know if it's monetarily successful or not. I hope it is at least enough to not hurt them to have made. I think there's certainly value in having creatives and creators get to make something that they want to make, regardless of what the marketing teams say will work. And so if more studios can find this kind of outlet, I think we're going to be benefited. But yeah, I think you are right, Colin, that it is unusual to see this kind of novelty, which was one of the bullet points that I wanted to raise, that you raised so well to begin with, which is to say, we don't usually get to see something and play something that just feels so different right from the off. And that's the fun part. I said I get to go to each level and see what they're going to do. Part of that is because the game itself is not what I was expecting. Mm-hmm. I wasn't expecting to get excited to see these 3D models. I'm not a model viewer type guy. I don't go to the menus to look at those kinds of things. I wasn't excited to hear a story about the various desserts that you can earn for the priestess and get like little cultural details about a fictional culture, right? And how those all work to what you're seeing as you descend this mountain. But it all works. And so there is truth in kind of the statement that the customer doesn't even know what they want sometimes. I had no idea I would like this game. I had no idea that I would want this game to exist. But that's what creatives can do to put things out into the world.
Yeah, show you things that's the beauty. It's the Steve Jobs, fucking Henry Ford, whatever, like faster horse kind of shit. You know, you got to have these like brilliant people really flexing their muscles. And I think this is a great sign, specifically with the renaissance of Capcom, maybe having a little more flexibility financially to continue to explore this stuff as they do the safer things that also, you know, the fucking Monster Hunter and all the things that are going to make them a ton of money. Resident Evil, obviously. You had said it earlier, Cog. I know you're kind of a fan of the Japanese aesthetic. I mean, and are you like into like the Shinto stuff and all? I don't know where you are on this sort of thing.
I wouldn't say like I'm hardcore in it. I'm just always fascinated. I always have this conversation with Matt. I'm always fascinated by things or cultures I don't I'm not privy to or have access to. So to me, when I was describing, because he's like, Maddie's like, Cog, the way you describe this game, like, this is crazy. I'm loving everything I'm hearing because you're so passionate about it. And it was kind of what Hoeg alluded to. It's like, you don't really see this, right? So I'm trying to make sense of it. And then I'm also, again, it's a fictional story. And the thing that really resonated with me, that this game, I played it exclusively with Japanese subtitles with no English.
Nice.
This game told an amazing story without saying a word to me. I basically say I understood some of the narrative without it explicitly, verbalizing anything to me. And I thought that was interesting. And I thought the thing that really kind of got me was the gameplay loop, because when you started mentioning, Colin, with, you kind of purify the defilement of the Torii Gate. And it's this push-pull. It's this, okay, do I carve all the way as close as possible to the Torii Gate, waste up a lot of resources, and potentially also put the goddess in danger in a very particular spot, versus maybe not spending as much resources, having a more defensible position, and then maybe freeing up more villagers that use that resource that you can convert them into the various types. And I thought that was interesting. Like, you had the woodcutter, and the one that I actually fell in love with that I thought at first was useless was the aesthetic, which is kind of like this priest guy, and he slows enemies. So I started to put combinations together. I started to put him in conjunction with the sumo, so he could slow it, and the sumo could stomp. And, I remember like leveling up the archers for the distance, because the game starts to introduce the Seethe. And the Seethe are these varied demon-like creatures, and they are overwhelming if you are not prepared. If you do not have the correct setup, you could be in danger. And another thing I like about it is, Colin, me and you are both fans of Ghostwire Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, definitely.
See, for me, as a kid, being a Sega kid, I remember being introduced to Japanese horror for the first time and just like freaked out. And there was this game called Consaden, and it showed me Torii Gates for the first time, and demon, and all these kind of very grotesque kind of creatures, but they also had some type of spiritual meaning. And I'm like, wow, this is cool. Like, I don't know what I'm experiencing right now, but it's scaring the hell out of me, but I kind of like it because it's unique. I've never seen anything like this. So this is what Kunitsu-Gami. I'm like, every time they introduce a new enemy type, and you're like, oh boy, how am I going to deal with this? So you got the push-pull of yourself being being aggressive, maybe going after them. And to me, the greatest feature in this game is when you go to the boss fights. And in the main fights, you can do this, which is what I consider the seize him mechanic, where you have like left trigger, and all the villagers you can command attack aggressively, and you're beating the hell out of them. You're doing it, but at the risk of leaving the goddess defenseless. Mm-hmm. And that's the push-pull of the game. Whether or not you be too aggressive, and sometimes it's a balance, right? And it's just so much to this game. The Suba guards, and putting the skills and assigning different things, and also the I believe the scrolls that give you little stat bonuses towards certain things. I remember, hey, repairing stuff during the day cycle is important to try to have as much defenses as you can. So maybe I put this thing up to speed that up. And Hoeg mentioned a good point. Every stage became, okay, what are they going to do next? One of the funnest moments was Yashiro they put like, she's possessed. You can't use so. Now it's all villagers. That to me was awesome. I'm like, this game is crazy. Like every minute it flips itself on its head and it does something else. Then it flips it and says, okay, no villagers. Just you as soul defending. And it just became, like Hoeg said, like, what is it going to do next? And it's just a love letter. I absolutely love it. And another thing, I don't know if we're going to get into it now, but I have to talk about this music, man. This music is phenomenal. I mean, it felt like a seance. You hear the drum patterns, and you actually see the characters dancing to the beats and stuff like that. Very cool. And the tension of basically during the day and night cycle, what would happen is as it's getting closer at night, you'd hear the music tension ramp up to let you know that Torii Gate's going to open. So you only have a couple of more seconds to do what you're going to do.
Wrap it up.
Yeah, wrap it up. Like you hear that clock. It's amazing. And the last thing I will say as far as gameplay mechanics is, which I thought was interesting, is when you cleanse the Torii Gate, villagers come together. She does the seance kind of dance thing, but there's this kind of like moving this item into like this purity circle, I'll just call it. And what I noticed is the more successful I was able to keep it within this radius is the more health she got. Mm-hmm. I was like, who thinks of this? What is this game? But I love it. But yeah, it's just so much to talk about it. But those are kind of the gameplay loops thing that really got its hooks in me, and I just couldn't wait to keep playing to see what was going to happen next.
Yeah, that's well said. It's funny, man. Like, there are so many. I think just using a day-night cycle and really beautiful lighting and kind of a stylized view of day-night. There's all these hints of where you are as like golden hour kind of approaches, and then dusk settles in, and you're like, can I get this one repair done? Can I get everyone set up? And I found it really important to pay attention to that, specifically because of the way the game has a really generous. I didn't realize this until deeper into the game, but it has a very generous save system where you can kind of just go back to the previous half cycle, so like 12 hours back basically over and over again, or whatever you would put it, and just having everything set up at the beginning of that, so if you needed to go back, you didn't have to do all that work again to get everyone into the particular character classes or whatever. What I found, what was fun about it was just how differently you can play it, and also how much the game opens up in New Game Plus and almost becomes easy, and then you can really abuse the shit out of the game.
This is news to me. Okay.
Yeah, like once you start getting all the character classes and then you go through the game again with everything unlocked, I think the game scales a little bit, but basically bosses that would have taken like 10 minutes to beat, like there are things like you can beat them in like 30 seconds at this point. You can like just beat the shit out of some of these things, and you just become stronger and stronger. You unlock more slots for your talismans and your accessories and all the rest, and so you become more powerful. Let's talk about some of the character classes. So you brought this up. The aesthetic is an interesting character class. I have to admit that each stage has a sort of set of, I think, 3 optional tasks or like things you can do. And then in New Game Plus, they add 2 more and they become really hard. And that's really where the challenge lies if you want to do all that. And I did all of that. You know, you get all the upgrade tokens and all the rest. So, and that's what you need to do for the Platinum as well to get through New Game Plus. But it wasn't until, so some of those optional things are like use every character class. And then I started actually using them, and it's like, oh yeah, there is a lot here, but I got to be honest with you. I really stuck with like the axe, like the woodcutters. I have them written down here actually.
Okay, who you got?
I used the woodcutters, and then I used the archers, but then once I unlocked the matchlock guys, I started just using them as well. And then once the ninjas are out, so
they're OP.
Yeah, they are like, and they're expensive, but by the time, so we'll get into all of like the repairing the villages and all that kind of stuff. But basically you're able to carry enough of the currency where you have so much, you can make like 5 ninjas plus have everyone else doing what you want to do. And it's just it's crazy how powerful you become. So it is cool manipulating that, but I must admit that I didn't get too deep into strategizing with a lot of these classes because I didn't really need to, with the exception of a few, again, of those optional tasks that you have to do. So it's like, if you don't want to take any damage during, like, there's an entire like 5-day sequence where you can't take damage or whatever. It's like, yeah, you got to really be defensive and careful or whatever. But generally speaking, I was quite aggressive. You end up carrying a shit ton of rations. I think they give you too many rations at some point. Yeah. Sometimes you have like 15 or 20 of them on you, more than that.
Yeah.
In a stage, because you're killing the animals and you're finding them in all these different treasure chests and all the rest. So, yeah, but Hoeg, let's go to you first. Talk a little bit about character classes and who you used.
Sure. I mean, I think the woodcutter being the standard melee, the first one that they give you is one that I think people rest with for a while, would be my guess. But I agree with Cog. The aesthetic is super strong. You slow down everything in your circle. And if you get some ranged people to go with that, you can really obliterate a lot of people that try to walk in. I was one that tried to put the priestess in the defensive circles that they would offer a lot of the time on the levels. And so I would use people that slowed things down around that circle and then run around and fight the bad guys a lot. And so I think I got them to a fully upgraded person. And I think one of the things that really works well with this game is the upgrade systems. So you're constantly earning different kind of currencies to upgrade or to get some of that lore that I talked about. And at some point in the middle of the game, you get to decide whether or not you're going to upgrade yourself. Yes. Or the villager classes. And I think there's a lot of good choices to be made there. And in terms of art, I think it's really cool how the masks change when you upgrade your villagers. But the reason I'm mentioning it here is that you can really change the way some of these people work. With like the aesthetic can really increase their range and their ability to slow people down. Some of the woodcutter stuff is a little bit more standard, how hard they hit, how much damage they can take. And so I think those are probably the classes that I wound up using the most. I got to be honest, I didn't get to ninjas, so that must be a little bit past where I am. But
that's the final class that you would unlock right before the end.
I didn't get there.
He's good. He's good.
Yeah, Kagura.
Yeah, no, I hear you, Hoeg. I would say for me, it started off. I started to get the appreciation for the archers early because of the aerial enemies. I would say the cannoneer started to become very important for me when people were getting clustered. There would be tons of heavy to medium sized enemies coming out of some of the torii gates from different directions. They became good. One nitpick is, Colin, you can help me out if you used him. I didn't find, we have the shaman who actually heals.
Yeah.
The female, but then there's the male priest, and I couldn't really find a good use for him. I felt, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe you found an efficient way. Like, I felt he was kind of like a wasted class. That was the only one I'm like, because he's supposed to like stop raging seed, and I'm just like, I don't feel like I'm encountering this enough. You're right. Yeah, I have. Yeah, I only use that. There were again some optional things where it's like remove the seethe, curse 20 times or whatever until you bring. I agree, it is a waste because they do have the healer, and then they have the aggressive like black magic user as well. Right. So now I will say, Hoeg, if you could get to the sorcerer unlock, he is probably the most powerful. It is literally the ninja magic one. When he comes out, he summons this big entity and it can stun bosses. It can wipe things out. And you can actually carry multiple. They're pretty useless other than that ability. They just sit there and they just kind of enchanting and trying to invoke a spirit or whatever it is they're doing. But if you have multiple of them, they're very critical for boss encounters. I would almost borderline say OP. And then Ninja was the last one, which is kind of like a mini version of So, which is a balance. You can, use your Kunai against aerial enemies. It will run down, and it has smarter AI tracking than all the other classes. The other ones kind of stay stationary where you place them, but this one will go seek out the enemies and kind of operate the way you do. So I would say that I thought it was an interesting design choice as far as you continue to advance. Some villagers could only be the sumo. If you notice,
right. Yeah, some of them had like I think it was I don't know if it was gender or what it was or like
yes,
it was swan and something else. Right?
Yeah, like a swan and then maybe like a toad or a lizard or a tortoise or some tortoise kind of thing. If you saw that icon, you knew I can assign my points for this specifically. So I think that's the game's way of trying to balance because they know once you got enough currency, you're probably going to put a whole bunch of the most powerful classes kind of thing. So I thought that was interesting. And the last one I want to shout out, which I thought was a weird one, but I ended up starting to use him a little bit, was the thief. Because I'm like, okay, you can't use him in a battle, but in the pre-stage, he can go unlock treasure chests. And when resources are finite in the early game before New Game Plus, I felt he actually was helpful because you need that currency a lot to upgrade people and stuff like that. I thought that was really helpful.
Yeah, the thief is useful. Like you could leave him in at night, and then if you upgrade the thief all the way, he'll go and get a bunch of currency for you around the stage, and so you don't have to go collect it, which is interesting. I never did that, but I know that's because there are trophies and achievements to upgrade everyone fully and upgrade all of your own skills fully, which I did both of those things. I don't think you could do both. I did one and then spoofed the other and then just reset my save. So I did have all the classes upgraded totally. I found half the upgrades for my character not really that interesting or useful. There's like a whole different way of fighting, like a whole different set of combat skills. I didn't use any of that stuff.
Really?
No.
Did you unlock did you use the finisher at all? Because he has like a finisher, a counter. Like Soul's tree is very extensive. I know the villagers have their own, but like it's this push pull between whether or not you do. And I did notice like one or two. I'm like, wow, this is kind of powerful that they kind of have locked behind a skill tree for the main character. I thought it was kind of interesting.
Well, yeah, the priestess dancing. So is really sword dancing. Like that's his combat style the whole game. So it's all dancing. It's all bright shiny lights. The cannoneer that Cog mentioned is fighting with like fireworks. So it's all pretty throughout. And that's a choice in and of itself. But I think it makes for quite a bit of the artistic vision in the game. Yeah. The other thing I wanted to add, Colin, is that you mentioned it, but one of the really cool things and smart things I think in terms of design with this game is those achievements for every map, which remind me very much of a mobile game, right? It's the getting the stars in any given level, which is a smart design when you're trying to be efficient with your assets and what you're building. But it's even smarter here where what you are getting out of making those achievements are the currency that you need to upgrade the various people across the level. So you really have to go and do some of that as part of your progress down the mountain, or you're going to wind up essentially behind the power curve. And I think that really added nicely to the longevity. I'm always a fan of developers and companies being really efficient with what they've put together in their product. And this is one of those cases where for a game like this, which to me straddles the line between a kind of AA and AAA approach, is smart about saying, okay, this level can be played 3 times or 5 times. The difficulty I do have with it is as you get into the harder levels, some of those become very, very hard to actually get. One of them I think is borderline unfair just based on the way the controls work, which is they have some that's like don't heal as so. And the way that the controls for this game work is that you heal if you hit the attack button while you are parrying or while you're blocking. And you're going to want to be blocking a fair amount of the time. And for my particular hand, and this is a Hoeg unique issue, one of the major issues I have is that my left index finger tends to pull on the controller. So if it's over the block, it can just block without me paying too much attention to it. And if you're trying to attack and you accidentally heal, you've lost this over the course of what is a fairly long sequence of events to get that particular achievement. And that comes up a couple of times. Don't heal villagers. You have to really screw up to go through the menu. It's multiple menus to heal a villager. But it was one thing I wanted to mention because I do think you can accidentally heal yourself a little bit too often if you just find yourself parrying and you're depending on the game to be taking complete track of when you're blocking and not, when you've got some animations in the middle.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah, there are some control peculiarities because there's a lot of input. Like the game actually has you do an enormous amount of things. So they do a pretty nice job of circling the controller and using everything that's there. It does get a little silly though at times, and I did heal myself accidentally and do a bunch of other things accidentally too.
Isn't the dodge in on the left stick? I always thought that one was weird.
That was weird. I was just about to mention that because I ended up going away from, because I could not master the blocking. I felt was decent, but I couldn't master the parry mechanic, which I thought was going to be a major part of the game, which it is. I just couldn't master it. So I ended up weaving a lot. And to your point, Hoeg, on Xbox, it's like right analog in to weave. I thought it was like an interesting design choice to make that the weave button kind of thing. But it actually saved me a lot, especially a lot of boss encounters that when we get into that, I believe it was like one of these centipede bosses that would rush you. And once I committed to the weave, the game became easier because I used to play the game like you, Hoeg, when I was block, heal, and it just became too tedious in these boss encounters. So that's my only advice. I would say that. And then if you can get the sorcerer, you know what I'm saying? I can show you some strats. I can show you some strats to kind of make things much easier in conjunction with the aesthetic to slow things down. You know what I'm saying? From that standpoint.
Well, that's the trick. At a certain point, when the masses are coming in the middle of the game, it's just a little too much. It's a little too fast for me to handle.
I got you.
So that's where I'm at.
The sorcerers are actually vital to spoofing the final boss in New Game Plus if you are having trouble with him, because if you can have everyone as sorcerers, and then they like Cog was saying earlier, you build up this like secret meter that is like its own like summon that you can do, and it fills very slowly. But if you have a bunch of them, it fills really fast, and you can just kind of run around and use it over and over again. So they become pretty important to like breaking the game later on. And I would argue that you don't break the game per se, but one of the things I like about the kind of optional tasks is that you go in blind. You don't know what they are. If you recall, when you beat one of the stages, it'll show you the ones that you got, and then you can see everything that you need to do. So it's cool. So you can't even, the game is designed well enough where it's like, don't even worry about that, because you're not going to know unless you're reading a guide or whatever what you need to do anyway. And then it'll kind of fill you in on everything else you need to do. And what I've discovered, especially with the boat related stages, is you have to go pretty deep into the game and then just go back. Because I'm very obsessed with doing everything on a stage when I play games like this. And this game does a really nice job in its UI of showing you everything. When you go to a stage, it's like you were talking about the thieves, the black treasure chests that you find that the thieves dig up, those are counted. If you purify all of these different things and get a bunch of currency, you unlock these little boxes that have new items in them, and it tracks that, and then it tracks all of these tasks and all the rest. So it gives you everything. It reads really well, and I'm like, I just want to do all this so I don't have to go back. And I would often do that, but there were times where I'm like, there were times where I hit some of those tasks, and I'm like, I literally have no idea how I'm supposed to do this, and then it becomes comical later on. I remember one of them was for the boat stages was like, don't let anyone land on one of the boats or something like that. It's like, what? And then you find out later, it's like once you're more powerful and you have, then it becomes like a joke. And then the ones that they have you do in New Game Plus are those do get insane. There are some late where I'm like, this is fucking hard. And that's where you have to start really, frankly, spoofing saves or whatever between, like, if you have like a 6-day stage and it's like, don't let So get hit. And then like you get to the 5th day and he gets hit, you just have to reset to like the beginning of the 5th day, and there's no one that's raw dogging that stuff. I don't think it's because some of it's really hard. There's that one stage where like you're like going down a road and all the doors are shut and then the enemies bust through the various doors and you have to beat that without you getting hit, which is crazy. And without, so either the priestess or the playable character getting hit. And it's like, that's crazy. But then you do it. I did it, and it's like, wow, that's very rewarding because it seemed not even daunting, but there were a couple times where I'm like, this is the end of the road for me. Like, I don't know that I can do this, but you overcome and you figure it out. And you manipulate the game as best you can. Okay. So what do we think about, the in-game economy? We brought this up a little bit earlier. It's like one of the things that stands out to me. And I think you said this, Cog, was the game does a nice job of balancing everything so that it's hard to, you can break it with strategy or do very clever things if you know what you're supposed to do. Like you want all matchlock guys on this stage. It seems unintuitive, but it's going to work great for you or whatever. But it does do a nice job of balancing everything and kind of like the upper limits of your ability to carry these various things. But it coerces you to do what I think is probably the lamest part of the game too, which is like the fixing the villages once you're through it. It's very like busy work kind of whatever.
I like fixing the villages. It gives me connection. Yeah, it gives me connection to the villagers. And they have little villager stories about how one is cheating on the farmer's wife and the others are gossiping about it and they're angry in this particular direction. You make them fix the shrine and it's all good. No?
I think for me, Hoeg, when it became like I felt like obligated to do it because it was kind of like one of these things where I'm like, all right, I saved the town, whatever. And again, going back to the music, what made me do it, to be perfectly honest,
it is the
most tranquil, serene, beautiful music when you purify a town. Like, I'm like, all right, I got to help these people. All right, what you want to do? I got to get the plaques now. I just wanted to help. And then you see them bringing the wood over and, constructing and you're rebuilding society for them. You know what I mean? So I did get into it because of that. At first, I was mad. I was like, do I got to do this all the time? But once I got to the reason, I'm like, all right, you got me on that part. But
that's funny. It might have been the building the village on the first level that actually convinced me to get the game.
Really?
Where I was like, this is an interesting aspect of this, and I like that this is its own system that goes with the other building systems that you are earning either that lore that I talked about or the currency to go and raise up people's levels. And to me, that's all very interesting. It also adds a kind of sense of time passing.
Yes.
Because you have to go and play a level or two between your fixes of these various things in the town. So you're always going to be like a couple levels up front of a town being completely fixed up. But I can certainly understand people finding it to be busy work or otherwise boring. I guess I like the theme of rebuilding these things. I like, you get a little like New Year's popper and some confetti when you fix something.
That is true.
I'm easily pleased on this kind of stuff.
No, for what really won me over, I'll say, okay, I got to do it, is because, to Colin's point, I think it's called the Masabi. It's that pink pouch currency.
Mutsubi, M-U-T-S-U-B-I. Yeah.
That is extremely important. As a person who likes to min-max and a person who likes to level, especially when I started to fall in love with certain classes, I'm like, they start to show you, okay, at tier 3, this is what's going to happen with the matchlock, right? And you start to get better. They get more health, they get more resistance, or they do better area attacks. And for me, what really changed my course of the difficulty of the game to help me was anything that did like heavy resistance or could potentially stun an enemy. And once I started to unlock those for a lot of the characters, then the game really opened up for me to be able to tackle some of the more difficult bosses. So that currency was key for me. And I'm like, okay, I would leave the lore plaques to last, even though they were good to read. And I would focus on all that Mutsapi first, get all that stuff, and then go back to the goddess, do the exchange, that kind of bit. And I will say where I got the lore stuff more, even though you love the plaques and you get the deep lore as far as
I do love
why the corruption happens and stuff like that. For some reason, the confections was, I was like, this is a weird game. Like, I'm giving these sweets that are based on real, authentic, food to the goddess, and she's eating it. Like, I was like, what is happening in this game?
And strangely high amounts of lore around those desserts.
Yes.
Like, this is the village, and this is how they repented about the greed that they had done, because they make now cherry pies or the equivalent. And it's like, well, okay, that's interesting. Like, all of that adds to the feeling of it being a real place that you're saving, a real mountain that you are bringing nature back to. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I enjoy about this interactive medium of ours, is going and exploring these real kind of feeling things. Mm-hmm. And so often games feel superficial or feel like they're just mechanics laid on top of something. You can feel the white box version of the game where it was just a green X and a triangle, and they just put something on top of it. And at no point in playing Kunitsu-Gami did it feel like that to me. Like, this all felt like they were building this notion of the dance purifying and the sword dancing defender all at once. It was a very holistic experience.
Yeah. And to your point, to add on, when I was reading, there's not a lot of information about the game, but when they do, if you go to Capcom's YouTube page and they do talk about it, one thing that really impressed me in reference to your point with the city and the rebuilding and the town, the whole game is built on legit dioramas. They made dioramas of each of these towns in miniatures, and use that as far as the game design, as far as just drawing randomly like that. I thought that was very interesting design.
It looks like it. It looks like a kind of tilt shifted kind of look at all of these things. One of the things I wanted to mention is this kind of solidity of the graphics, right? I've talked about the art models. I've talked about the various things that I like about how it looks. But when you actually go into these models, when you look at the masks, when you look at the towns you're rebuilding, there's just a certain kind of physicality to the graphics that is part of the RE engine, undoubtedly, but also just really part of the artistic design of this game that I just really appreciate. The masks look amazing. Like, I would like a collection of those masks on my wall.
I had a Tokyo Game Show. I was so jealous. I was like, I want all of them. I want to.
There you go.
They're showing with all the masks, though. I'll get that as well.
All right, Capcom, if you're ever robbed of your wall of masks, it was not us. I just want to be clear.
Yeah. By the way, I looked up when I was researching Mutsubi, M-U-T-S-U-B-I, which is the upgrade stuff. And I couldn't find anything on it. I found Musubi, M-U-S-U-B-I, which is a Japanese rice ball, but nothing with that particular spelling. So I don't know if it's like fictional or just some deep Shinto shit that I just don't know about, but which would be any Shinto shit, basically.
It's an interdimensional rice ball. You just add the T.
But yeah, there's all sorts. The game is one of the cool things about the game, though I am largely ignorant of Japanese culture, is how deeply rooted it is in a lot of those things. That's why I kind of dug the desserts and the Amaki scrolls and the Emma plaques and all these different things. I didn't get too deep into the lore. Like, I didn't really read much of anything. And in fact, I really only appreciated how much lore is actually in the game when I realized that each villager has like a background and like all. It's like, so each one you find, there's like hundreds of them in the game. It's kind of, maybe not hundreds of them. There are probably over 100 of them, more than 100 of them in between all the stages, you would think. Easily. So that's like a lot of unnecessary. I get it. I do a lot of unnecessary writing in my small shitty games. So I would definitely do a lot of unnecessary writing in games like this. But I appreciate the level of detail.
I was so into this. I was not having like the people that were in a feud in the village defending each other. I was putting them on opposite sides of the goddess. I mean, like, this is fantastic.
That's so interesting. It would be even crazier if the game took that stuff into account.
This is why I can't be Colin. I'm too busy worrying about the villagers' lives.
Yeah, no, it's good. That's good. And again, that's very much like Actraiser. I mean, bringing it back to that game, the whole game's premise is like the villagers praying to you as a god and like begging for your help. You know, it's kind of interesting. And I do wonder, that's what you said, Kyle, like there's so little about this game. Like I would love to know more about where this idea came from. I would be surprised if Actraiser wasn't a touchstone though.
For at least an influence. Yeah, it definitely has a lot of Actraiser in it.
I want to talk about some of these other character classes, by the way. Did anyone use so the sumo wrestler was pretty interesting because he attracts attention, which is good.
Sometimes you need some taunt.
But I didn't ever really, I tried them, but the spearman didn't really seem, like it really seemed like the woodcutter maxed out was like beast. But like on bosses where you were saying like use the R2 like and just like everyone attacks at the same time, just beat the shit out of these things with just the maxed out woodcutter.
Always felt like Pikmin to me. The villagers are just getting thrown into walls and things.
But did you? So I just wanted to note that I didn't really use the spearman. I didn't really use. We talked about the priest, but I also didn't use the cannoneer very much. Did you? Did you guys? Yeah,
bro, you gotta. They're good. Again, when you fought those big, medium-sized enemies, they're very good against those bosses. I forgot the names of them, but they're very tough. They when they come out, they almost they become a priority where you have to focus on them. Otherwise, they will kind of like distract you and get them your villagers like in this kind of
right, like that. Yeah.
So when those guys came on the map, the cannoneers were no joke. They took care of. They're very good for the aerial enemies, and then to Hoeg's point in terms of the firework kind of ability. So they would hit the enemy, it would explode, and then it would be these kind of like explosive pieces that remain on the ground and would still do damage if enemies continue to step over them. So they actually did have a use towards the end game. I would say, I wouldn't say like they were mandatory, but they did help in conjunction. The sumo, I'm telling you, the sumo with the aesthetic combination, because the sumo is slow. So I would put usually him as like my first line of defense in front of the goddess. Like, I mean, the last line of defense in front of the goddess, when everyone, kind of penetrated. And when the aesthetic would slow them down, he would do a stomp. You could max level him, and then he would stun enemies. And if you had the finisher ability with Soul, you could get an easy one kill. I'm talking about those huge towering guys towards the end, Colin. They're very big. They're very imposing. They're like boss. It's actually Hoeg, you would know it.
Yeah.
Remember the first boss you fought in the game? That big they become like regular enemies towards the end.
Why not?
And they are very imposing. So that's when the sumo, I started to see the strength of that. I agree, Colin. The match lock is extremely powerful. I think I used
get them on those little stands.
Yeah, put them on the stand. Have such crazy distance if you do that. It's crazy.
They're tearing stuff up. And then also, if you repair, I call almost those little circular match-like things where if you keep the villagers in that circumference of the circle, it would do extra damage and extra healing. If you put matchlocks and archers there and start setting up, you could get really defensive like that. And I did want to mention one stage that I had the most trouble on, the Great Cherry Tree stage. Did y'all get to that?
I got to look this up. Yeah, I'll see. I'll remember. I don't know anything by name. That's what I've been looking at, trying to figure out boss names. Yeah. It's all Japanese. It's all Greek to me.
Yeah, it's all Greek. There's a stage, I don't know if you got to it, where it's like this very demon tree entity. This thing is huge. This is one of the most frustrating encounters because I didn't know what am I supposed to be attacking? What am I supposed to be doing?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. And then the different tendrils come out or whatever. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And it's like a two-form battle. It's like
like you fight this ghostly entity that comes up, and then like you fight the tree, and then you fight, you fight the tree, then the ghostly entity, then you fight the tree again.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the wildest encounters I've ever seen. I mean, these bosses, I have to admit, from a design standpoint, whoever came up with these bosses are insane, these concepts that they're thinking of. And the music I thought was also really good during the encounters as well.
God, the fucking...
Now I have to get to a place where I fight a giant tree.
So no joke.
I'm very motivated. I tried to get further this weekend. I got a little bit further than I was. But I do want to fight a giant tree. That's just
I got
on my bucket list.
I got you, Hoeg. When we get to the talismans, you want the one. All right, I'll just tell you one of my loadouts.
Yeah, go ahead.
Really helped me. Okay, so the first one I had is the kind of protective bubble, right? When you unlock that, in case of emergency and she's getting rushed, throw that on the goddess, right? And then you'll buy you some time. So that's the first thing. The second one is there's a one that you put on the ground. It's almost like the
traps. That's my favorite.
Not the trap. Well, that trap one's good, but it's not as powerful as the singular. It's a singular floor placed thing that can stun someone instantly. If you use that stun mechanic in conjunction with unlocking the finisher, the boss state will be dazed. You just press, I believe, the Y button on Xbox when they're in that stun state, almost an instant kill. This is on bosses. This is on high ranking enemies. And then I think the third one I kind of went between the traps because I would do what Colin did because he did New Game Plus where you get like 3 to 4 slots. I highly recommend investing that because you want the most abilities you can during these encounters. And the last one I just switched based on the encounter. If it's an aerial boss, I used one that did medium stun damage towards aerial attackers. And then other ones, I did the one where, I don't know if you remember this one, Colin, where wherever So is, he would do a medium attack and then teleport back to the goddess.
Right.
And then come back and do a medium stun attack where the goddess is. That one is very good when you're in a pinch and they try to separate you from the goddess. Yeah. So those are my 3 go-tos.
Yeah, I'm trying to look up the... it's funny, I know what they look like. So yeah, the Suzaku's Flame is one of them. That's the default one. Perform 2 consecutive ground-based attacks or whatever. I use that one a lot.
How you daze people.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
That one is a good endgame too.
And then Byaku's Claws I use a lot. Perform a swift, ferocious forward slash, so you go through them.
Ooh, yeah.
And then it usually knocks their meter out. Mm. And then the third one I would usually have would be either Kochin's Ward, which is the defensive one where you put the orb around you, and I would do that around So. Is So the woman? No.
Yoshiro's the woman.
You're So.
You're So. Both of them are women.
Right. So they're both women. Yoshiro, you put the little orb around her if things were getting a little heated. I would have that. But then when I was trying to be really aggressive, specifically in New Game Plus, when there's all these time limits for the bosses and you have to get under these time limits, and there's a trophy and achievement for getting cumulative time under 20 minutes between all of the bosses. I don't know if you guys saw that. And it's
not anything I would ever see.
It's comical just in that it seems like impossible, and then it's like you get way under it once you start abusing the shit out of these guys.
I think I currently have a boss time that's 13 minutes long, so I can't imagine getting them all under 20.
That's normal in the beginning, and I'm telling you, man, like because you're going through the game, and at times like it's all you have is the woodcutter, all you have is the woodcutter and archer, all you have is the woodcutter, archer, and aesthetic, all you have is the woodcutter, archer, aesthetic, and thief. It's like you don't have much to work with. Once you get crazy with it, these things are.
It's going to be easy, Hoeg. Trust me. He's right. Colin's absolutely right.
That's what
purposely do that.
It is. It's unfortunate because, well, there's something fortunate about it. It's actually quite gratifying, which is why I enjoy doing it. But you get more out of the game in New Game Plus than you do in like, it's not just the thing where it's like, oh, I don't want to be done with it yet. I want to fuck around with it more. It's like, no, actually, this is kind of the game now. You have everything at your disposal. You understand everything. You have your 3 Suba Guard slots. You have your 5 Mazo Talisman slots open. By the way, if you're upgrading, I highly recommend upgrading your character classes immediately. Like the woodcutter needs to go all the way to the top immediately. The archer needs to go all the way to the top immediately, in my opinion, because you can remove all that stuff later if you don't use it. And then you have to
resource cost versus the other one. Sorry, continue.
Right, and then you have to invest, and it's a lot, but you have to invest in like more slots for your stuff because that's going to make the game a lot easier. It is a lot. It's like 50 or 70 Musubi or whatever to unlock this stuff, which is an enormous amount. But it makes the game so much easier. You know,
they need their rice balls.
Give them their rice balls, which is what I think they are. But what about Matzo Talisman? Did you have any specific ones that you used? I was looking this up to figure this out, but did you have any? What comes to mind for you here?
Yeah, for me, it was all right. Whenever I do the day-night cycle boards, the one that makes the repairs quicker, I use that one. Anything that brought, I think it was like this. Forgive me, but I don't know. It just looked like a monkey statue, right? And that one basically causes the aggro of the seed to go to So as opposed to Yoshiro, the goddess. That one was helpful. Anything that gave me extra damage resistance or extra weapon, attack buffs, I would probably, focus on that. But I would feature, and I would say the game is very forgiving. Like say you lose to a boss or whatever, the game would kind of start to hit like, hey, maybe you want to try to do this, you know what I'm saying? Or that kind of thing.
It gives you an option. Would you like to change your loadout?
Yes. And the loadout option was key for me because sometimes I was really spec'd incorrectly for certain encounters. And I'm like, okay, now I'm understanding it. So yeah, those were the ones I can remember off top, but there's so many of them. And I will say it's to the point where I had to like kind of favorite some of them because that list of those things is extensive, Colin. It's so many. I'm like, Jesus, there's a lot of these things.
It doesn't read great either. There is a lot of it. It's not cogent in the way it's kind of put together. It is a little annoying. You don't really even get to know where the things are. But so I actually found mine here on the wiki because I wanted to get the names of them for people.
What you got?
I would typically keep these 5 unless I was trying to do something very specific, in which case I would maybe even get rid of all of them and do different things. But Rising Dragon greatly it greatly increases your health. Naori greatly increases your power. These seem to be 2 obvious ones because there are 3 for each of those slots where it's like mildly, moderately, greatly increases. So I have the greatly one for those, which you have to unlock later.
Yep.
The Diviner's Gourd heals you automatically, like quicker. So, your health your villager's health is static, but your health actually does increase. And so that will just make you healthier quicker. Surigani Oni allows you to take less damage from attacks, sieve attacks. And then Anguish Survivor lets your villagers take less damage.
Those are just good names.
They are, but it's funny, man. Like sometimes I would use the one where character classes cost like 20 orbs less, or I would use the one where, like you said, the repairs happen more quickly, where she'll carve through quicker into her path or whatever. It's like, hurry up, bitch. Like, why are you going so slow?
Tell me it's not hilarious though when you press the speed up button and she's doing the fast frolic.
Yeah.
I find that funny, but at least it gives you a visual representation of where she will stop, and I always thought that was hilarious.
Well, the game's great about showing you where she's going to end if you just take her to the end of the line. Like they have a highlighted version of where she's going to stop so that you can set up your defenses. But one thing I think would be useful is a notion of where you have to get to in order for the next day to likely get to the gate. I understand they don't know what kind of currency number you'll have after your fight, but it's possible there could be some kind of averaging out there, because one of the things you're trying to do, one of the things I really liked about what Cog said is it's a risk reward mechanic. The closer you get to the Torii gate, the easier it is for them to jump you. And so you're trying to stand back a little bit, but in general, you want to be past the point in which you can make it to the Torii gate if you want to the next day. So I would get most annoyed when I would spend all of my currency and see the highlighted priestess just in front of the gate. Like you just didn't get there.
Mm-hmm. The worst.
Like, all right, well, we're going to have to do something different then tonight, because we're not standing you right there. That is not a place I can protect you. So it's risk reward, and also maybe a little bit of guesswork, especially in the middle. And I swear that they like to have those defensive spaces that you can keep her in most protected, just in front of where you're likely to be able to get her to the gate. And it's like, oh, you're killing me, game. You're so mean.
Yeah, I had a question for you, Colin, in reference to that. Another mechanic the game starts to introduce is the splitting of the Torii gate path.
Mm-hmm.
And like, what was your thought process when the splits happened? Did you go towards more places that had defensible squares or whatever? Or did you kind of say, you know what, the path of least resistance will get me there the fastest? Like, how did you strategize?
Yeah, I think I would go towards the fastest path, just because I felt like you were lessening your overall exposure is better than making, elongating your exposure, but making you safer. It's like, let's just get this over with. So when the choice seemed obvious, I would make that particular choice. A couple of the paths are like 6 of one, half dozen of the other in some sense. What was funny though in New Game Plus was, so you're trying to get through the stage as quickly as possible, generally speaking, but then there's times in New Game Plus where you have to really grind things out. And so you have to stop moving basically for sometimes multiple days and just like let things happen. And that seems like totally unintuitive, or just slowly move forward. That actually happens in that second to last stage, that long street with all the doors on it, where there's something happens in that stage where you have to like coerce a bunch of things to happen. And so you need to give it a lot of time. And I was there for like 8 or 9 days, which is crazy in the game,
Wow.
And that's a pretty tough stage. And you're kind of limited to what you have. Eventually there are no wild animals. There are no treasure chests. Like you're kind of on your own. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, that's what I would seek out typically, was the path to least resistance, just because with rare exception, I didn't find the game difficult. Like I thought it was highly playable. I thought the difficulty really came in trying to do the optional stuff. And then there were a couple of boss fights the first time through where like, yeah, that's fucking annoying, but you can just brute force your way through it. And the thing you learn later on, and I'm sure you guys realize this, is you can just kind of endlessly farm, currency by just going to previous settlements.
Yes.
And talking to, the priestess in the tent, and she'll give you 60 and a ration or 100 or whatever. And then you can kind of just, so at first I was like, God damn, it was one of the stages where it's like use every character class, and it cost me all my currency. And I'm like, fuck, because for a while I just wasn't using very much currency. I would always be maxed out, and then you would actually lose some at the end of the stage because you had too much. And then I was like, damn, what do I do? And I figured out, yeah, you can kind of farm like 1,000, 1,200 by just, if you're patient, by just going to these different stages over 5 minutes or so. And
that cap system that you mentioned is interesting as well, right? Because they have the number that you can kind of take out of the end of the level, but you can get as many rations or as much currency as you want within the stages that you're actually playing. So that allows you to get do that farming. It allows you to get what you need vis-a-vis your villagers and everything else, but it's not going to let you carry over all of that grinding to the next level. So it doesn't make it feel mandatory to grind a bunch of times. It's your option, and you can help yourself that way. But I just think they made a lot of really smart design decisions with that cap and the way that that works in the game.
Yeah.
And yeah, unlike you guys that have your power talismans and everything else, one of the ones that I was using the most was the help me find things to purify talisman that vibrates your controller and makes a sound when you're nearby something, because I wanted to get all of the purification done, because you get a bonus item when you purify everything in a given area.
Yes.
And I was trying to rush to those. And even though you'd think that a giant smoking toxic crater would be obvious to go and purify, the way they blend into the rest of the aesthetic in the game makes it a little bit harder than you would think.
Yeah, it gets so annoying. Some of them are just like, where is this fucking thing?
Is it?
You know?
And I had to tilt the camera. I'm like, I cannot find it. It's going great. I had that problem.
There's a few stages, one in particular where you have to use the bow and arrow teleport thing to even get to new parts of the stage that you have no access to. It's like, come on, man. You know, like, what are we doing here? But sometimes I would encounter, like, there were times where I'm like, you know, they show you the villagers you capture and then, or are free rather, and then there's like a silhouette because you didn't get one of them. And I'm like, I missed a villager?
Yeah.
Like, where was this thing? And then you find it later on. It's in a house or something, you know?
Yes. Or the ones where they force you to use the building mechanic to get through to unlock a spot where one of the villages or a cocoon is hidden behind. That was also interesting as well. I believe it started with like the cave stages, when you go into the cave and then you have to use them to repair stuff. And how did you guys feel about the lighting stuff, where they had, you know, turn on the lights or light the candles in certain stages and stuff like that? How did you guys feel about those encounters?
Yeah, they were cool. There's that boss fight that's centered around that too, which is kind of interesting. And then again, with the optional tasks, there's that stage where like you get one of the check marks for keeping all of the lanterns lit, and then you get one of the check marks for letting none of them extinguish, and then you get another check mark for not using any.
Yep, I did.
Which is another great example of going back to stages multiple times. Although you can double up the not letting any go, like, out, and just not using any, and it will count the same or whatever, which is cool. It's a nice mechanic. They do seem to layer things on in a reasonable way to kind of differentiate and change things up. It's the same thing with the boat levels. It's like, yeah, you kind of felt like you needed to do a little something here. I don't hate it. Yeah. You know, it's actually pretty intense.
Yeah,
those stages.
Yeah. They start capsizing those.
Yeah, and you like the risk reward of the tongue coming out, and then you're like, shit, do I have time to like get rid of this thing? And then sometimes you get sucked under with the boat. It's pretty cool. You know,
both stages are fun.
So I think that the lighting thing, in my opinion, is just another one of those little touches that I think differentiates some of the stages from each other. I don't hate it. You know, you could see a game like this being like, let's just keep the same mantra for the entire game, you know, and just play straight up like a Pac-Man game or something. You know, it's like the rules are all the same. It just gets more intense.
Yes.
You know, I'm like, no, you don't have to necessarily follow that design philosophy. And they didn't. You know,
you're right.
The tree fight you were saying earlier is another one, because that kind of combines everything. It's a boss fight technically, but it is a stage as well. So they do some cool stuff with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And to your point, last one I said is that I know Hoeg is like intimidated by some of the stuff we said, but I'm telling you, Hoeg, like, the game is designed that once you unlock all those character classes, each one of them, and you start to replay, it becomes easier. It becomes so much easier. And what I finally realized with the priest is the stage that I mentioned earlier, where I like where Yoshiro gets possessed, the thing goes over her head, you're forced to use the villagers. At that point, you don't have the priest when you first play the game. If you have the priest at that point, you can remove that from her easily. So, because that was the one where you kind of have to invest in the currency to build that meter to get the possession off her, to bring soul back, and then not just use villagers exclusively. And that's what I said, okay, I see what the game is doing. You become way more powerful when you start to replay these stages with character classes that didn't exist at that point of the introduction of the game.
Also, you can bring in enough currency to just beat it in 20 seconds at that point, too, which is funny. I did that one time, you know, where it's like, literally don't have to do anything, you know? So yeah, I hope you can overcome those hurdles should you choose to.
I got you, Hoeg. I'm going to tell you the crazy OP lineup what to do.
Yeah. Also, it's like, are you playing on PlayStation or on Xbox? Oh, I don't know.
I am on PlayStation. I mean, one thing I think I've said here, I've certainly said on my own channel, is that I play on both. I like the Xbox and the PlayStation, but with my hand the way that it is, the smaller PlayStation controller is easier for me to use.
I was asking specifically because I don't know what Xbox's situation is, but and I've never done it, but can't people on PlayStation play it for you? You know, isn't it called share play or something?
Yes, but I don't really want to advance the game past what I can play. But yes, my brother and I have played it that way from time to time. Not this game, but in the past.
Nice.
It's cool that that's an option, you know?
Yeah.
What do you guys think about a potential future for this game? I imagine we all agree that this is probably not going to be revisited. It's just too bad, you know, because I think that if this is the first one, I imagine you would get a pretty robust second game. I would hope that they wouldn't go overboard. It's what I was always afraid of with Uncharted, and they resisted it, where it's like, I better not turn on an Uncharted game one day and there's like a leveling system. Or, you know, like weapon upgrades and shit like that. It's like, no. And they never did.
God of War.
They never did it. I appreciate that. You know, that's like more of The Last of Us, for instance, with the weapon upgrades or leveling like in God of War and stuff like that. So I would hope that they would resist the urge to go crazy with it, but I bet you there's like something underneath the hood here that hasn't been discovered that would really shine in a sequel. And I would say at max a few 100,000 copies, but I think that that's probably pushing it. You know, so there'll be no sequel. But what would you want to see in a sequel, Cog? Would you want to see something new, or is this a game to be left alone, even if it was popular?
No, I would love to see it. I mean, obviously, it's a new genre. I just love the fact they took this creative risk on it. For as far as what I would want to see, just more an expansion of this lore, so to speak, right, of the story. Because I did do some research. Obviously, I beat it. I didn't finish all the way with New Game Plus because I'm very, very anal in the sense that I want to complete every stage requirement as opposed to just going through it because I want all that currency, to be honest with you. You know what I'm saying? But I know what happens. The thing that's very interesting about the story that I thought was dope is it's very cyclical. So your character is kind of like a spiritual protector of Yashiro, the goddess, and then the journey of the mountain, right? You're going down the mountain and you're purifying the town and stuff like that. But also there's a cyclical nature in the sense that if you end it, I'm going to talk a little bit ending now, Hoeg, is that when you end it, it really messed me up emotionally because I'm like, this is not fair what has happened to the goddess. It's almost like a crystallization. The defilement is not completely removed from her. And then she, you know, seems to die and the story goes on. And I'm like, damn, like, didn't feel fair. Now, to Colin's point, when you do New Game Plus and you encounter Cursed Soul after you beat the final boss, and then you start to see, okay, this is where it goes. And what happens is it's cyclical because once basically how the game is supposed to work, there's the chosen divine, you know, maiden becomes the goddess, and then so is the spiritual protector. The cycle is she's supposed to die. And then so becomes the goddess. And then it's the next generation of, you know, show becomes short, and the next generation of person, and the cycle continues. When you do New Game Plus, you end it, you break the cycle. And I thought that was awesome. You know what I'm saying? So I did as much research as I can to that because I was so angry. I'm like, this is not fair. Like this goddess is supposed to live. I did all of this kind of thing. So I thought that was cool. So basically what I would want is just more an expansion on the lore, more expansion on the defilement, more on what you mentioned, Hoeg, like what I thought was interesting, like kind of the corruption of man. When you read about these characters or these bosses that you're fighting, you know, they became greedy and this happened. And, you know what I'm saying? Like, basically, to me, the seed is a representation of the fall of man kind of thing. So just more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, more expounding on that I thought would be cool. And keeping to Colin's point, I want them to keep what I consider the soul and the nature of the game. I don't want dialogue. I want it to be as expressive and artistic as possible. And any other cutting room floor ideas that you didn't get a chance to put in, please do. And yeah, I would definitely support. I hope this game did better than 100,000 copies, man. That would break my heart because this is truly a beautiful game. And the last thing too, I saw, I know they're calling it a Kagura whatever game.
Yeah, what is it? Genre. Kagura Action Strategy.
Right. But that dance and stuff they do is actually based on something real. It's another name. I forgot what it's called. And I watched a whole play on this thing. And go to the Capcom page. I'll get you guys the link. It is beautiful. They dress up in these exquisite costumes, and it's almost everything you see in the game is kind of represented artistically and musically. Yeah.
They have the video there available from their PlayStation screen.
Yes.
So if you're a PlayStation player, you know that they have like the various media elements below where you say start game.
Yeah.
Capcom's put a lot of their behind the scenes. I have seen that.
Yes, you saw the whole play and the thing, the puppets and the thing and the mountain. I'm like, yo,
Good stuff.
Yeah, it's awesome. So yeah, I would say that, and I had to support the soundtrack, man. I love that thing. The drums, they show the people make it's insane, the production value of this stuff. So I would love it to continue.
I just read into, by the way, just about its sales numbers, about, I would say a couple 100,000 is what I would think it would be at. I don't know though for sure. It's just anecdotal stuff. You know, we don't have any numbers. They're probably never going to share any. And well, Capcom does share numbers, but I don't know if they do for smaller games. Usually when I think games get over 1 million or 2 million, but just as an anecdotal thing, I'm looking now on PSN profiles. You have to opt in for this, but these are like the most hardcore PlayStation fans. Is Astrobot has more than 40,000 owners, and Kunitsu-Gami has fewer than 1,000.
Gotcha.
Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster has almost 3,000. Until Dawn has 1,500, and no one cares about that game. I think even Castlevania Dominus Collection, which is the DS collection, has 2,100. So it's not looking great, unfortunately. But that's anecdotal. I just say that because these are hardcore people that would even know the game exists. So if anything, it's overrepresentative. And that's too bad. But Hoeg, do you have any thoughts on it? I mean, you didn't see the game all the way through yet. Maybe you will, but any ideas on a sequel? Or should this be a game that's left alone? I do like the idea of just leaving things alone. It just seems so, it's so fun.
One-offs are good. I think what I would want is for this team or this creative development force to be allowed to make something new. Whether or not that's Kunitsu-Gami 2, whatever that might be called, or something that also involves strategy and action that explores a different mythos, but has this level of artistry in it, is what I would most want to see come out of this. I would want a full-throated endorsement from Capcom that says this is the kind of thing that we support. And I will absolutely be on board for whatever the next project is from the people that made this, because I think we talk a lot about video games being art, wanting to be art. I think very often that discussion becomes how much movie-like they can be, how cinematic, how impactful they can be in relation to other mediums. This to me is 100% video game art, that it is the process of actually playing through it. And you can pull out not just the lore that's written for you to read, but like what Cog said, how the actual game uses New Game Plus to talk about cycles and the plot that they're putting forth. So it's got the themes that we expect from certain Japanese art, like toxicity and nature and these various aspects of its culture, but it's also built into a video game in a way that I don't think we get to see a lot. So as long as we keep getting to see that from this team, I would be happy, because I really do look back at some of the eras of video games and enjoyed the variety and novelty of really seemingly folks figuring out what a video game even is in 3 dimensions or with high definition graphics or whatever it might have been as we moved forward to this point in time. And I do think it's easier for more, especially of these big publishers spending a lot of money on making games, to go and say, this is what worked before, we're going to do that again. And this kind of novel approach to something that I think clearly spoke to these creators is what I want to see more of from everybody, but certainly from this team.
Yeah, well said. I think for me, I just want more of the gameplay. I think, and I don't mean the sound, because it's like the two ends of the poles where it's like it was too hard for Hoeg because of some limitations, which I understand. Like, I think the game could be harder.
No, I do like this entire conversation is it's too easy, and I'll just sit over here.
Well,
like, yep. No, I get it.
People say that about, I mean, I'm not, listen, it's not even a self-deprecating thing. Like, I don't consider myself especially good at games. I'm good at 2D games, like 2D action games is where I excel. So a Mega Man game or a Castlevania game or whatever, I play very effectively. But generally speaking, I'm not like a mega talented 3D space gamer. And maybe I underestimate my own skill in some sense, but I feel as I get older, I'm slowing down. I reflect all the time. The games I used to beat when I was fucking 7 or 10 on the NES, I used to murder these games. And I sit down and play Kid Icarus now, and I'm like, no, I can't even do this anymore.
Yep.
And meanwhile, I was in like first grade beating it. It's like, seriously, I have no idea. So I'm not saying it from that perspective, but I just think for this game, I'm like, why didn't it get harder? Like, why is the game? It's cool that it's cool that it becomes more accessible in the New Game Plus and that you can fuck with it. And like I said, break it. but there should have been like maybe a ratcheting up of it a little bit. I do think it scales, but maybe not sufficiently considering the amount of currency you have, the character class options you have, and so on, and just the knowledge of the game. At the very least, I'd like to see this game get an expansion or something, or just something to lay over the game. Like you can almost just remember Far Cry Primal. And I've talked about this in the past, that people discover that Far Cry Primal's map is Far Cry 4's map, that it's the same topography. Like if you removed all of the vegetation and all the buildings and everything, that's the same place. And you see something like that and you're like, damn, could you do something like that here? You know, and just like reskin it, rework it. Do you have like the bones of something that you don't have to do much to bring more replayability to it? But that said, I've spent about 45 hours with it to get the new game plus, and I did it over months. And I think as I said earlier, it's a great just pick up and play PlayStation Portal style game. That's why I was wondering if it was on the Switch, because it might be most at home on the Switch in the sense that you're just playing it and you're putting it down.
I agree.
But it's great on all these other platforms too, and I really enjoyed it. So I'll hope against hope, like you did, Cog, that the game sold better than we think. I think if it could get to fully paid, if it can get to like 500,000, I think you might start getting into like, you know, do we spend $10 million and make another one, you know, right. Or $15 million or whatever, and actually market it and try to do something with it. It just seemed like similar to Until Dawn with Sony. They kind of pooped this thing out and they didn't seem to really care. The unfortunate thing about that is that it's great nonetheless. And I think reinforces Capcom's growing reputation. I mean, fully bolstered and really doing great job. It makes me want to they're not even getting into the shit I care about, really. I mean, I love Resident Evil, but like Mega Man and, you know, things of that nature is what I would really love to see. Animusha.
Oh yeah.
And so on and so forth. So were you going to say something, Cog? I didn't know if you were.
Yeah. No. I'm glad you mentioned in reference to the portability aspect. I think a Switch port would be pivotal for them if they can somehow scale it, or maybe waiting for Switch 2 to do the port then when we don't know they have the capability. To your point about you playing on a Portal, this was the perfect ROG ally game for me while I was flying, and it was just perfect. It's that perfect balance of, again, turn-based and real-time action, tower defense, and
well, it clearly has a mobile sensibility. Like that is the level design of having those extra achievements. Absolutely.
So to your point, there's hope for a second life, I feel, on Switch 2. And then also to your point, Colin, which I highly agree, is that I would love some form of an expansion of just maybe cutting room things that were still left on the floor, or to your point, like a difficulty ramped up or a boss rush, because towards the end of the game, it's almost a boss rush at the end. You know what I'm saying? They kind of flirt with that. Okay, now let's see how you truly master it now that you have all these abilities and you get to face these kind of things. And I will say the actual final form of the last boss, I thought was interesting. If you're not spec'd correctly, that's the first time the game is a little unfair in the sense that if you're not spec'd correctly, you will be punished and penalized and have to go back to an older save with the first form of the boss. So, there's still stuff to be there, but I would hope that this game gets enough attention. I try my best to signal boost this thing as much as possible. And for those who are listening, I would highly advise, because a lot of people don't want to spend the 60 or whatever it is. The demo, like Hoeg said, the demo was the selling point for me, because I went in there and I'm like, okay, let me see what this thing is. And I'm like, okay, wow, there's nothing like this. And this is fun. And I can't wait to play more. So
I thought it was a completely different type of game before that. Same. Demo. I really thought that it was a linear action game. And that first camera angle that you have, when I was able to swing the camera around, I was like, what is this?
Yeah.
It was like a different game than I thought it would be. And I was very happy to find how enjoyable it was. So yeah, play Kunitsu-Gami, support novelty, support variety when it actually works. Risk-taking, as I like to say, requires risk. And so they might not sell a lot of these. They might not make money on it. But if you like risk-taking, if you like to see new things in video games, Kunitsu-Gami is an excellent thing to support.
Yeah, agreed. And by the way, I was just looking it up on PSN. So again, it's on Game Pass. If you have Game Pass, just go play it there. The demo's still up on PSN as well. I'm sure it's still available on other platforms too. And the game is $10 off until November 2nd from when we're recording. So you have 10 days or so from when we're recording. So
perfect time for Sacred Symbols Plus.
Right, exactly. So it's $39.99. I think even at $49.99 to steal, I was happy to buy it at $49.99. And I think that was a really great price for it. But $40 is great too. So go support it if you can, if you want to. But like you said, the demo is a no risk option for you to get a taste for it. And at least you'll know one way or the other if you have the inclination towards it or not. Because I can see some people seeing this and be like, I don't get this, but that's every game. I do think that this is more. I wish Capcom did a little bit more to sell this thing. I don't know why they didn't.
Colin, this is one area where I'm going to disagree with you on this, which is that you said that they just kind of pooped it out. I think that Until Dawn was that. I don't think that Sony exactly knew what to sell there. But I think for Capcom, they pushed a lot of stuff in the places where they thought that the cultural value of this game would be appreciated, and went out there with what I consider to be pretty full-throated support from a publisher like this, but they didn't waste their time on trying to market it to the broader audience. They know it's not a 4-quadrant type game. And so they might have been able to do a little bit better, but I don't really feel like they don't believe in this or didn't believe in this. They just knew that it was very niche in orientation.
Yeah, you're right. And I think you're kind of precluded from maximizing your market share, frankly, with a game on Game Pass just by nature of it being available, not purchasable, and people kind of also being like, oh, I'll play it later. I'll play it at another time, and so on and so forth. I just don't think the market potential for this game was fully realized based on the way it was released, but I think that they did what they needed to do to get over the finish line. So I don't begrudge them that at all. I think that's smart. Take the money. And I think this game would have gotten fully buried if not for Game Pass. So yeah. So, well, I appreciate your guys' time. I don't have anything. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about? I think that was a pretty good discussion. It's probably the most robust discussion anyone's ever had about this game.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I think I've said it. I would just like it on the record that I love this game. It's almost certainly going to be one of my top games of the year. And even if you're sitting there saying, I don't know about that, guys, that sounds pretty weird. There were a lot of different words said there that were definitely not English. I felt the same way. And it wasn't until I got to play it a little bit that I really became attached to this thing. And for me, at least, it only got better as it went along. It only grew in my estimation. And I'm not, to give my tilts on this, I'm not the type of guy that just generally goes in and looks at those models, that enjoys these various kind of gallery things that go along with a video game. I do sometimes. But here, like, there was so much value in getting further on down the mountain and seeing the next level and seeing how it looked, seeing that villager lore that Colin was talking about earlier.
So much. I had no idea it was there.
It's just a constant kind of like trip to an interesting museum that you get while you play this excellent video game at the same time. And I think usually you get one or the other. You can get some really cool art and music and maybe some nice things to look at, and not the best game to play, or the opposite, which is you get a great game that maybe doesn't take that effort to make these amazing monster designs and show you them all in high definition models and things. This is both. So if any small aspect of this you think interests you at all, I highly recommend giving it a try, because this one will deliver your attention back to you in spades.
Yeah, well said. And echo my thoughts, echo exactly, in the sense that, shout out to Capcom for taking the risk and just absolutely killing it in that regard as far as the year that they're having. But yeah, this was one of the more pleasant surprises, and definitely up there as far as one of my games of the year. I really enjoyed this game. And again, shout out to Xbox as far as helping fund it, getting across the finish line with the art style, color palette, and the boss design, with all the things they helped out. And then again, shout out to the developers. I just love the attention to details, the dioramas that I saw that they made. Just everything being handcrafted. The game screams culture. And as a person who loves learning about this kind of stuff, it like you see, museum is the perfect kind of analogy. I felt like this was an educational experience on a culture that I really do, or fictional culture I knew nothing about. So I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, that's well said. I'm glad we got to have a conversation about this game. Hopefully bring it to a few more people's attention and give the people that already played it, somewhere to listen and watch and get some information about it, because I know there's not a whole lot of talk going on about it. But is it my favorite game of the year? No. It's potentially my second favorite game of the year. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is my favorite game of the year, but somewhere in between 2 and 4 probably for me.
Yes.
Because it would be up there with Astrobot and Stellar Blade. I don't know how those would all mix up, but it's been a fairly strong year for games, in my opinion, from what I've played. And I've also played a lot of things this year that I enjoyed that didn't come out this year that I wouldn't count. So,
and you haven't played Metaphor yet.
No, Metaphor. That's soon, if not even imminent, tonight maybe. All the Islanders play tonight, maybe tomorrow.
I think you're gonna love it, Colin.
I'm sure I will. I bought it.
Yeah.
I bought it. I'm ready to go on it. I have so many open games right now, but I'm kind of waiting for the Pro to get back to Silent Hill and do a few other things, because I just think it's
Metaphor is the real deal. So
yeah. I'm excited.
Try.
I'm excited. So, yeah, that'll be in a minute. But guys, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about Kunitsu-Gami,
Yeah.
Path of the Goddess. Be well. Let's say goodbye to everyone. Hoeg, goodbye to you. Be well. Have a good rest of your week.
Thank you for having me here. I'm always enjoying talking just about games. We have no legal aspects of this to talk about at all. Love it.
Well, that's why I know you want to do more of those kinds of conversations, and I'd like to have you involved in more of those conversations. So that's why I'm glad we were able to include you. And I do think that there is value in the person who didn't beat it or got stuck on it. I wrote a couple of reviews during my journalism days from that perspective, specifically for a game called Under Siege that people might remember on PS3 that was so fucking hard, where I wrote, I'm like, I don't even know like what I'm supposed to do. You know, I'm like on the third stage, and that was the whole point of the review. A lot of people made fun of it, which I understand, but I think personally there's value in that as long as you're transparent about where you are in the game, which you are.
I am, as best I can tell from the achievements, about 4 or 5 stages from the end.
Okay. I got you, Hope. I got you. I'm going to get the winning loadout.
Cog, goodbye to you. Be well. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, man. I couldn't wait to do this, man. I'm so excited to see, you as passionate, as me in reference to this. And I saw Maddie in our Discord was like, make sure your Cog, he goes crazy about that game.
I was happy, dude, to learn that you were into the game. I feel like I knew it at one point. Maybe I forgot. But I had just played it intensely, and it sounds sad, but just from my perspective of doing these shows where I'm like, I hate to not be able to extract something out of the experience for a piece of programming, right?
Yes.
And so I just put in our staff Discord like, oh, did anyone play? I assumed to be ignored, because sometimes people just ignore me. People ignored me about Until Dawn, and then I no one answered me for like days, and then I answered my own Discord message where I'm like, I guess I'll just kill myself.
Yeah, I was dying when you wrote that.
So I was expecting a similar thing here. It didn't come to pass. I got you. So I'm glad. And then we got to pull Hogan as well. So I think that's great.
Yes,
so
it's a great group.
So we'll be back. We'll talk again soon. I'm sorry, Hogan.
I said I got to get on that Discord.
Oh yeah, we'll invite you.
I would have backed you up.
We will invite you to that Discord. You should be there.
Yes.
Okay. Well, guys, be well. Thanks again. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support. Last Stand Media, Sacred Symbols, patreon.com/Last Stand Media for early ad-free access, etc. laststandmedia.store for merch. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.